Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
The moon. End quote. Queen Ant, we've confirmed that it was the king's doing. He wants to drag the entire Earth into a space fragment. Only then can Earth disappear from the attention of other civilizations and avoid being exposed. End quote. A mutated ant reported to the giant Queen Ant, its body trembling. End quote. With our current strength, how long can the moon last after the Earth really disappears? The Queen Ant asked. After losing gravity, it will definitely deviate from its course. When that happens, the moon will be directly thrown out. It's very likely that it will crash into other planets and be destroyed. However, we all have the ability to survive in space. If we really reach that point, we can just devour the entire moon and then look for a new planet. The ant was crazy. Since the Earth can be sucked into the space debris, the moon can definitely do it. Remember, no matter how powerful we are, we must have a foundation. The solar system, the moon, and Earth are all where our foundations are. I will contact the king. I believe that the king has his own judgment. The Ant Queen said seriously. After she finished speaking, she immediately used her mental power to communicate with Yi-Bei. As the king's apostle, the Ant Queen could communicate with Yi-Bei at any time. But of course, other than the moon. It was the same for the creatures on other planets. End quote. This won't do. If Earth disappears, there's no point for the solar system to exist anymore. Contact the king and get us into the space fragment. End quote. Yes, and our planet. End quote. Recently, I heard that Area 51 has been studying space technology. They have long created a space fragment that can accommodate the entire solar system. After Earth is done, we should be able to start. End quote. Yes, this is definitely unimaginable. In the future, as long as the king takes us, we can travel the universe together. If there's a need, we can come out from those space fragments at any time. This is simply too good. End quote. We can plunder even more resources, and we won't have to worry about not having a place to store them. End quote. All the major races and planets were filled with such voices. In fact, at the moment, in Area 51, Yi-Bei also heard the feedback from these voices immediately. End quote. Morpheus, after you suck Earth into the spatial fragment, immediately do the same thing to the other planets in the solar system. By then, every planet will be in a separate spatial fragment. When we have time, we can slowly open up a path. End quote. Yi-Bei said very calmly. Yes. Morpheus replied. 50%. 80%. Under the crazy suction of the vortex, 80% of the Earth had already been sucked in. It was quite magical. Despite the terrifying energy storm, the buildings on the Earth's surface were not damaged at all when the Earth entered the crack. Even the Earth's magnetic field and gravity didn't change at all. The only thing that caused the Earth to sink into darkness was the loss of sunlight. It was obvious. The space debris that was chosen to contain Earth had been specially modified by the humans of Area 51. 99%. Who? In the control room, all the scientists' breathing became rapid. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the screen. You must succeed. We're just a little bit away from entering an isolated space. Morpheus clenched his fists tightly. Tap, tap, tap. The cold sweat on his forehead dripped onto the ground. It will definitely succeed. Neo's expression was grave as he gritted his teeth. Once Earth succeeds, the other planets can do the same. Trinina said with an extremely serious look. 100%. Finally, as soon as they finished speaking, the huge red word, 100%, appeared on all the screens in the control room. At that moment, Yi-Bei could clearly sense that the entire sky had turned completely dark, and there was no longer any light. I've succeeded. This is great. Yay. End quote. We're done. The entire Earth has entered a space fragment. End quote. It was too easy, just like I expected. End quote. As long as we stack a few more layers of space, any civilization that wants to find us will have to pay a great price. End quote. Countless scientists were cheering. Although countless experiments had been successful. However, it was definitely not as shocking and exciting as today. We've succeeded just like that? Yi-Bei stuck out his forked tongue. To be honest, the fact that the Earth had been sucked into the spatial fragment didn't give him much of a shock. On the contrary, he didn't think it was a big deal. In fact, it was true. After defeating a three-body creature, Yi Bei led the army of mutant beasts and destroyed dozens of planets. The total area of Earth was still very small in front of those planets, and it was indeed not that shocking. Yes, King. Next, you just have to put this space into the forest of death. But before that, we have to compress the space fragment again and make it as small as possible. After hearing Yi Bei's words, Morpheus immediately replied. And while he was talking, the scientist at the side had already begun to take action. Tap, 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 tap. It was the sound of frantic typing. In the universe, where Earth used to be, it had completely disappeared. In its place were one terrifying space vortex after another. Boundless energy was emitted from those vortexes, giving off a feeling of destruction. However, as the scientists typed on their keyboards, a vast amount of energy rushed toward the vortexes from the depths of space. The energy emission devices had been set up in advance, and they were now squeezing the vortexes like crazy. As time passed, the vortex was getting smaller and smaller. But at this moment, in another galaxy in the depths of the universe, countless alarms were ringing. This galaxy was incomparably huge. It was even more terrifying than the Centaurs. Among them, there were a few planets that were all made of metal. In the universe, it released a cold light. A voice suddenly came from one of the giant metal planets. And quote, "Planet Azure has disappeared, and we are losing control. All our resources have been moved to another space fragment." End quote. The voice was completely mechanical, cold, and emotionless. His voice fell. The entire universe was silent. 1 second. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. 2 seconds. 10 seconds. After a full 10 seconds, another voice was heard. It seems that the civilizations above have already developed to a certain extent. It's time to awaken some of the seeds. His voice was filled with killing intent. The Earth had disappeared. The news spread to all the civilizations that were paying attention to the planet. End quote. Damn it, they must have used spatial technology. But those guys are really crazy. They directly placed the entire planet in another space. They want to use this method to escape from the fixed target point and escape control? On the Centaurs, the army of the tri-body civilization had already moved out. However, just as they were heading in the direction of Earth and realized that Earth had disappeared, such a voice immediately appeared. It was not just the three-body civilization. In the universe, the space snake, the blackwater giant beast, and countless pairs of eyes were all shocked by the disappearance of Earth. The situation in the solar system was completely different. Hoo. After the disappearance of Earth, the gravity of the entire solar system had lost its balance. All the planets began to change. However, the situation on Earth, which had been sucked into the fragment space, was still very normal. Spatial compression is about to be completed. In Area 51, this character appeared on the big screen. And Yi Bei didn't hesitate. End quote. You guys continue to collect the other planets. Each planet is placed in a space fragment. I'll go put this fragment of Earth into the forest of death first. End quote. After saying this, Yi Bei's body turned into a golden shadow and disappeared. When he reappeared, his body was already floating in space. Yi Bei's eyes couldn't help but widen as he looked at the scene before him. The place where Earth used to be was now completely surrounded by space storms. The Earth had disappeared into thin air. A huge pressure pressed down on the vortex from all directions. In the center of the vortex, after Yi Bei released his mental power domain, the first thing he saw was a shattered spatial fragment. The fragment wasn't very big. After being compressed, its diameter was no more than 20 meters. If one wasn't familiar with the structure of the space fragment, it was really hard to imagine that a huge planet could be hidden in such a fragment. In the old human civilization, it was definitely a fantasy. Very good. Yi Bei narrowed his eyes. After confirming the location of the fragment, he did not hesitate at all. Whoosh. His body turned into a golden light, and he rushed toward the fragment at his fastest speed. Forest of Death, open. Crack, crack. When his body collided with the vortexes, crisp cracking sounds rang out. But Yi Bei didn't care at all. Just as he was about to approach the spatial fragment, his consciousness stirred, and he growled. Immediately after, a huge spatial vortex appeared in front of Yi Bei. In the next second, the spatial fragment was madly sucked in by the vortex. The whole process took less than a second, and the fragment was completely absorbed into the vortex. At the same time, as the spatial fragment disappeared, the space gradually returned to its calm state. But to the entire solar system, this was just the beginning. After the Earth disappeared, the Moon was the most affected. However, just as the Moon was about to deviate from its course, an endless vortex quickly appeared around it. In less than 10 seconds, the Moon was swallowed up. And then, the third one, the fourth. Under the control of the scientists in Area 51, in less than a minute, all the planets in the solar system had been completely sucked into the various large space fragments. And Yi Bei didn't waste his time. His body shuttled back and forth in space. Whenever a planet was absorbed by a space fragment, he would collect the fragment at the first moment. Less than 10 minutes had passed. All the planets in the solar system had disappeared. A terrifying storm was brewing. Even the entire Milky Way was greatly affected, and the positions of countless planets were changing. However, this no longer had anything to do with Yi Bei. After he sucked all the spatial fragments into the forest of death, Yi Bei immediately returned to it. Walala. With Yi Bei's return, the living trees in the forest of death shook their branches wildly, as if they were welcoming him. But Yi Bei focused all his attention on the spatial fragments. After being sucked into the forest of death, each of the space fragments looked like a broken mirror from the outside. However, they were all floating in the air. Those fragments were constantly emitting violent energy. What a magical thing! Yi Bei flicked his tongue and muttered softly as he looked at the spatial fragments floating in the forest of death. Walalala. Immediately after that, a living tree made entirely of metal began to move. Under the control of Yi Bei's mental power domain, the living tree actually used its branches and vines to form a huge cage, one after another, and wrapped up the spatial fragments. The gap in the cage was very large. The light from the spatial fragments made these things look like luxurious hanging lamps. The living tree only took less than 10 seconds. It wrapped up all the space fragments that contained the planet. Hanging on the same vine, it looked shocking and mysterious. This is much better. From now on, you will be called the space tree. All the planets that you occupy will be stored in the space fragments and then hung on your body. In any case, the forest of death is very safe. Yi Bei made his decision. Walalala. The living tree swayed its branches and completely agreed with Yi Bei's orders. Just as Yi Bei was integrating the spatial fragments, the three-body civilization's army had already arrived quietly. The Milky Way is up ahead. Now is the best way to destroy them. Although they are hiding in the space debris, those debris must be in the Milky Way. With their current technology, they can't cut the space debris from other galaxies. As long as they attack the entire Milky Way, they will be destroyed. In the three-body civilization, a cold voice rang out, filled with endless killing intent. This is a good idea. However, if we really destroy the Milky Way, the surrounding galaxies will also be affected. A voice rang out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. It doesn't matter how great the impact is. Everyone has seen the horror of the snake civilization, right? If we allow them to continue developing, they will become the greatest threat. Today, we must eliminate them. The cold voice resounded again. Dimension reduction strike, begin. Then, these three-body life forms began dimension-lowering attacks without any hesitation when facing the Milky Way. The terrifying storm instantly rushed towards the Milky Way. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The Milky Way was surrounded by huge, three-body life forms. Each three-body life form was emitting a faint light, looking extremely terrifying. After the dimension reduction strike command was issued, these three-body life forms instantly accelerated to superluminal speed and turned into terrifying black holes. They carried a destructive attitude as they charged toward the direction of the Milky Way. The three-body civilization had sent a large number of people this time, and it was fast. And NBSB, whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After they passed through the Milky Way, the majestic energy instantly covered the entire Milky Way. From a higher dimension, it wasn't difficult to see that after the three-body life passed through, It was as if a huge palm had appeared above the entire Milky Way. That palm was 100 times larger than the Milky Way, and it finally slammed down. Poochie. It was as if something had been smashed to pieces. The Milky Way, which had been existing in the universe for a long time, was shrinking rapidly under this force. Boom, boom, boom. In space, countless planets were colliding with each other, giving off terrifying explosions. Overbearing. He didn't give them any chance to resist. It couldn't be blocked. The entire Milky Way had disappeared from the universe just like that. Meanwhile, in the Forest of Death, when the Milky Way was attacked, almost the entire snake civilization knew. And quote, "Damn it, it's the tri-body civilization again." They lowered the entire Milky Way's latitude. The solar system was completely destroyed, and even the sun exploded in the process. "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" Morpheus stood in front of a large screen. After seeing the scene on the screen, his body started to tremble, and his eyes were filled with anger. No matter what, the solar system was still a part of the Milky Way. The civilization of the snake tribe was born in this place. Now that it was destroyed, there was always a strange feeling. End quote. What a terrifying power. However, one day, the three-body civilization will have to pay the price for this. After we master Dimension Reduction Strike, the first thing we'll use it on will be the centaurs. End quote. Neo growled, his eyes red. We should think about what we should do now. We're all in the Forest of Death, but the solar system and the Milky Way have been completely destroyed. After the Dimension Reduction attack, this place has become a ruin. There are spatial turbulence everywhere, and even the vacuum has been shattered. There's no way out. Trinina asked, her voice filled with worry. And as for Yi Bei, when he found out that the three-body civilization had gone crazy and directly carried out dimension reduction attacks on the entire Milky Way, he was also very shocked. It was because the distance was too far. Yi Bei didn't notice the three-body civilization's attack at all. In fact, the entire snake tribe civilization did not even notice it. If they hadn't happened to be hiding in the Forest of Death, under the dimensional reduction attack, the entire snake race civilization might have disappeared in an instant and become a part of the cosmic fragment. He was furious. Yes, at that moment, Yi Bei was extremely angry. But on the surface, he was still very calm. End quote. System, we're all in the Forest of Death now. But the solar system and the Milky Way have been destroyed. If I go out now, will I still be in that star system? Will I still be able to survive? In his mind, Yi Bei immediately began communicating with the system. Of course you can. Host, the space of the Forest of Death is the safest fragment in the high-tier universe. It is protected by a powerful force all year round and will not be destroyed. End quote. In addition, dimension reduction attacks will only destroy the Milky Way and the solar system. When the Overlord reappears outside, it will no longer be possible for that place to exist due to the latitude. At that time, the Forest of Death will allow the Overlord to appear in a safe space. There's no need to worry about this at all. The system quickly replied. After hearing this, Yi Beiming heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he revealed an extremely relaxed expression. The solar system, the Milky Way. To be honest, Yi Bei didn't have much affection for these things. So what if they were destroyed? Besides, this kind of destruction might not necessarily be a bad thing. At least, in the future, Yi Bei would have nothing to worry about, and he would be able to carry the space tree with him wherever he went in the universe. It doesn't matter. That kind of attack has no effect on me. Morpheus, you guys calculate which other suitable planets are around here besides the Milky Way system. We'll just go there directly. Yi Bei flicked his tongue and swept his gaze over the furious Morpheus and the others as he spoke calmly. Yes. Morpheus was slightly taken aback. But when he saw how calm Yi Bei was, he immediately returned to normal. He believed that as long as Yi Bei was around, all problems would be solved. And quote, King, actually, I think the Centauri is the best place to go. They destroyed the entire Milky Way this time, so they definitely didn't expect us to be alive. And we're all in the space debris. King can take us there and release everyone. It'll definitely have an unexpected effect. End quote. Morpheus suggested. Oh. Yi Bei's eyes lit up when he heard this. He had to admit that this was a very good suggestion. It can indeed be done this way. In the meantime, I'll open the Forest of Death to you. I've hung all those space fragments on a living tree, and I'll have it cooperate with you. I hope you can put all the space fragments together as fast as possible, Yi-Bei ordered. Now, all the planets were placed in a space fragment. But this wasn't the result Yi-Bei wanted. For a civilization to develop and progress, communication was definitely the most important part. In fact, Yi-Bei had even considered building an even larger spatial fragment in the future to accommodate more planets. Yes, my king, with our current technology, we'll be able to fuse all the space fragments within a month. If possible, we can even put a star into the space fragment and create a new solar system. Morpheus was full of confidence. As for Yi-Bei, he nodded slightly after hearing this. She did not answer him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. Instead, with a single thought, a twisted space appeared in front of him. He was ready to leave the forest of death and the space fragment. Yi-Bei was very fast. In the blink of an eye, he was completely sucked into the vortex. However, when Yi-Bei reappeared outside, he couldn't help but be shocked. He was already in another star system, and the scene before his eyes was even more shocking. This star system was many times larger than the solar system. Silence. Strange. In the depths of the universe, almost no sound could be heard. Yi-Bei's body was coiled up in space. However, in his line of sight, it was a completely different scene. Countless blue planets were flashing. Countless stars were emitting dazzling light. Those planets formed a shocking picture in the vast universe. It looked like a human, but also like a horse. In the image, there were countless spatial vortexes flowing. It was extremely terrifying. At that moment, Yi-Bei even felt that he was extremely small. Compared to the entire universe, he was not worth mentioning at all. But when he looked straight ahead, he felt a majestic life force. System, where are we? This galaxy was simply too unfamiliar, and Yi-Bei couldn't see through it at all. So he instinctively asked the system. The edge of the centaurs. End quote. What you are seeing now is the entire centaurs. End quote. The system gave the answer directly. What? When Yi-Bei heard this answer, he was stunned on the spot. He's in the centaurs? From the forest of death? This was completely illogical. End quote. It would take at least countless light years to cross the star constellation. I was still in the solar system before this. Isn't this too fast? Even though Yi-Bei had seen all kinds of storms and had even become a python, he couldn't help but be shocked when he received this answer. He couldn't help but question the system. The solar system and the Milky Way have disappeared. The system was a random teleportation point. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. The system didn't intend to continue explaining and only calmly threw out this sentence. But after Yi-Bei heard this, he felt that the system was rather strange. Forget it. He shook his head slightly and said, no matter what, it's great to be able to come to the centaurs so soon. Those guys are probably celebrating their victory now and preparing to return from the Milky Way. When those people return here, they will find that their homeland has been destroyed. I wonder what it will be like. At this thought, Yi-Bei couldn't help but feel excited. But of course, what excited Yi-Bei the most was the flood dragon's body. The worm dragon is in the centaurs. Next, as long as I completely devour this star field, I'll definitely complete my evolution, right? At this thought, Yi-Bei couldn't help but become even more excited. Whoosh. In the next second, his body grew to 1.5 meters long. Such a body was no different from dust in the entire universe. When Yi-Bei charged toward the centaurs at an incredible speed, they didn't notice him at all. On the other side, at the edge of the Milky Way, tens of thousands of three-body life forms were gathered here. The sight of huge planets floating in the air was spectacular. From the perspective of a higher life form, it was not difficult to see that these three-body life forms were actually holding a victory party in space. End quote. Low-leveled civilizations will always be low-leveled civilizations. No matter how powerful they are, they will still die from a dimension reduction attack. End quote. A voice rang out. End quote. Yeah, the entire Milky Way was destroyed. There is no longer such a galaxy in the universe. End quote. End quote. However, in this universe, every star system has a certain connection. When the space storm caused by the destruction here spreads out, our side will be more or less affected. That's the most troublesome thing. End quote. Influence? Don't worry, we're 10th level life forms, and we're even close to becoming 11th level life forms. So what if the entire Centaur constellation is destroyed? We'll definitely have a good time. There's no doubt about that. Let's celebrate. And quote, I feel that it's a pity. The planets in the Milky Way are all resources, especially Earth, which has an abundant water source. It's all wasted. End quote. End quote. The universe is vast. What's a few resources worth? End quote. I'm guessing that many of the creatures hiding in the dark and observing Earth will definitely have black faces at this time. End quote. The three-body life forms gathered together, and such sounds kept coming out. The killing intent in his voice gradually dissipated. There was even some relief and joy. Under the dimensional reduction attack, they really could not think of any hope of survival for the snake civilization. But, just as the three-body civilization was excited and celebrating, in the depths of the universe, that rapidly moving space snake was another situation. And quote, damn it, the three-body civilization is crazy. They actually destroyed the entire Milky Way. What are they planning? Is it necessary to do this to deal with a newly emerged civilization? The space snake flicked its tongue, its voice cold. Originally, he had wanted to control all the creatures of the snake civilization through his mental power domain. But this time, his target had missed, making him very unhappy. The three-body civilization is courting death. Since I can't control the snake civilization, I'll make the three-bodied civilization pay a price. When I travel the universe in the future, I can use the three-bodied life forms as a means of transportation. Chi. His killing intent surged. After the space snake said this, it immediately changed its direction and rushed toward the centaurs. Not just the space snakes. There were too many creatures in the universe that were paying attention to Earth. The three-body life forms would never have thought that their crazy behavior had already attracted the attention of countless powerful civilizations. End quote. Change our target immediately and head to the centaurs. End quote. End quote. The centaurs destroyed the Milky Way. We destroyed the centaurs. That's also a form of revenge, right? End quote. The three-body civilization is indeed too arrogant this time. End quote. I can't stand it. Let them pay the price. In the universe, such a sound continued to reverberate, but the three-body life form was completely unaware of it. Just as countless civilizations and powerful races turned their attention to the centaurs. Whoosh, whoosh. In space, Yi-Bei's body had already transformed into a golden shadow and directly entered the star constellation. At the same time, in Yi-Bei's Forest of Death, read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. The snake civilization's army of mutated beasts were all ready to move. They followed Yi-Bei deep into the star field. Through Yi-Bei's mental power domain, they could also observe the situation outside, as Yi-Bei charged in the direction of the centaurs. All the creatures on every planet in the snake tribe civilization and on every spatial fragment immediately began to prepare for an emergency battle. Battleships were built one after another. Countless mutated beasts raised their heads in anticipation. They were very clear that once they went out, they would have endless food to eat. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In space, Yi-Bei was moving at an incredible speed. Because its body was very small, it was difficult to detect. But when he really entered the centaurs, he was quickly illuminated by a strange light. And then, in his mind, a cold warning sounded without any trace of politeness. And quote, unknown space creatures. If we continue forward, we'll enter the territory of the tri-body civilization. We don't welcome any space creatures here. If we go any deeper, we'll activate our attacks to defend. End quote. The voice was cold. It was sent directly through the smart device. Yi-Bei was a little surprised to hear this voice. Because in his line of sight, it was a vast expanse in front of him, and there were all kinds of giant planets everywhere. He couldn't see anything else at all, and that voice could still be heard in his mind. To be honest, this was quite strange and terrifying. End quote. Host. This should be the mental power defense system that the three-body civilization has built in this star constellation. Any non-tri-body civilization creature, once they entered this place, the defensive power would be activated and automatically send a warning to the intruder. Such a defense system is a symbol of the power of technology. Once some weak civilizations come into contact with it, they will definitely leave, such as the beast gods. The system's voice suddenly appeared, giving Yi-Bei a reasonable explanation. Oh, is there a way to avoid this kind of defense? Yi-Bei asked, sticking out his tongue. End quote. This kind of defense is built on the basis that it poses a certain threat to the constellation. When the host represses his mind power domain, including his strength, he will be like an ordinary cosmic meteorite. In that case, he will definitely not be monitored. End quote. And, upon hearing this, Yi-Bei immediately expressed his agreement. The next moment, he retracted all of his spiritual power domain, not releasing a single bit. The majestic aura on his body also disappeared in an instant. Even if a living creature appeared next to him, he would not be surprised at all. He would even treat him as the most ordinary little snake, which did not pose any danger. And NBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. After doing this, the warning in his mind disappeared completely. Yi-Bei's body continued to advance in space. As Yi-Bei continued to venture deeper, he had a deeper understanding of the three-body civilization. The star constellation was too magnificent. On countless planets, there were powerful defense systems. Among them, what amazed Yi-Bei the most was many planets in the Centaur constellation had been completely transformed. Their surfaces were covered with all kinds of solid metal, and there were artillery fire everywhere, emitting cold light in the universe. Yes, the three-body civilization's battleships were each the size of a planet. End quote. I finally understand why the snake civilization's level of civilization is so low. If we didn't see it with our own eyes, I don't think the mutated beasts of the snake tribe would even dare to think about it. But the tri-body civilization has long made this a reality. There are at least millions of planet-sized battleships in the Centaur constellation. Yi-Bei muttered to himself as he advanced. Moreover, he wasn't just simply advancing. Everything he saw was immediately transmitted back to the space tree in the forest of death. All the creatures of the snake tribe civilization could follow Yi-Bei and see everything. After confirming that the tri-body civilization had really transformed the planet into a warship, countless living beings were stunned. End quote. This is unbelievable. The tri-body civilization is really powerful. Their bodies are already terrifying, but I didn't expect their technology to be on par as well. Any planet has vast resources, and the tri-body civilization broke through imagination and transformed the planets into super warships. Just this alone is enough for our snake civilization to chase after them for countless years. End quote. Morpheus looked on in a daze. Previously, he had thought that he already had a certain understanding of the three-body civilization. But now, only after reading the information Yi-Bei had sent back did he realize that he was still a frog in the well. It's too big, so strong. If we have this kind of battleship, we can go anywhere in the universe, right? I've learned a lot this time. I wonder if those battleships can be devoured. It was strange to say. In the past, countless mutated beasts would have been shocked and wondered when the snake tribe civilization would be able to build such a warship. But now, they were only thinking about whether the warships that had been modified from planets could be devoured. When these changes and thoughts were transmitted to Yi-Bei's mind, he was rendered speechless. But, after Yi-Bei thought about it for a while, he felt that they weren't wrong. Morpheus, Caesar, think about it. Do you want to devour those three-bodied life forms? Or occupy some superplanet battleships? Also, recently, I know that all the races have multiplied, but that's not enough. Compared to the entire universe, they're still too small. Morpheus, you guys continue to create space shards. Once you find a suitable planet, bring it in and colonize it. Whoosh, whoosh. Yi-Bei was still moving forward quickly. Right now, his aura was extremely weak. The planetary battleships and the defenses set up by the tri-body civilization in this star field were completely useless. 1 day, 2 days, 1 month. Time was not worth mentioning when one was wandering the universe. After traveling at high speed for several months, Yi-Bei finally discovered a strange planet. The planet was crystal clear. His entire body seemed to be made of diamond. Looking from the distant space, the entire planet seemed to be emitting an extremely bright light from the inside out. Host, a pure crystal planet has been discovered. This crystal is the main source of energy storage. After a certain degree of polishing, a crystal the size of a human fingernail is enough to keep the anti-gravity vehicle running for 100 years. Just as eBay was trying to figure out what the crystal was, the system's voice rang out. But if it could store a huge amount of energy, it could also be devoured, right? So, eBay said decisively, and quote, "System, if I devour this planet, what kind of benefits will I get? How strong will I become?" With the host's current strength, he is unable to devour it. The system didn't hold back. All right, whoosh. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. eBay felt a little regretful. However, in the next second, his body turned into a beam of golden light, rapidly rushing toward the dazzling planet. As the distance between them closed, eBay actually felt a chill. This planet didn't seem to be as simple as a crystal. There must be something else strange about it. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know via our Discord so we can fix it as soon as p. It was so cold. After eBay landed on the crystal planet, he felt as if the blood in his body was about to freeze. That crystal was clearly constantly emitting light, but it didn't have any temperature at all. In fact, the light was completely cold. But at this moment, as eBay settled down on this planet, he had a different mindset. The distance was so close. He was more and more shocked. It was crystal clear. When it was floating in space, it looked like a huge diamond. After getting closer, eBay discovered that no matter where the planet was, it seemed as if it had been exquisitely sculpted time and time again. The surface of the planet was covered with strange characters. Round, oval, all sorts of patterns. The more he looked, the stranger he felt. The more he looked, the more mysterious he felt. System, this is definitely not an ordinary planet. What is it? I have a feeling that something big is going to happen. eBay quickly communicated with the system in his mind. Meanwhile, in the forest of death, inside the space tree, Caesar, Morpheus, and all the scientists of the snake civilization were dumbfounded at this moment. He was madly typing on the keyboard and doing calculations. And quote, "Mayor, these don't look like diamonds. I can't detect any carbon structure." End quote. "It's similar to a spiritual pearl, but it's also different." End quote. "This is a new material. It stores cold light, which can release cold air all the time. It's incredible. This thing is completely beyond the periodic table of elements." End quote. End quote. "Quickly think of a way. Let's create a fragment space and store this thing first." End quote. All right. In Area 51, the scientists were so thirsty that they couldn't stop shouting when they realized what was going on. Caesar's side was in a similar situation. Perhaps, to eBay, the planet was no different from a diamond. But after the snake tribe's true technological calculations, they soon discovered that the crystal was a completely new substance. When the snake civilization was doing their calculations seriously, the system also calmly answered eBay's question. "All right, host, I didn't want to say it at first, but since you've already discovered the abnormality, I'll tell you. This planet isn't a so-called crystal or a so-called diamond, but it's compressed from countless spatial fragments. In other words, you're in a fixed spatial fragment." What? eBay had many conjectures. But after listening to the system's explanation, his body suddenly froze. This planet was at least 3 times bigger than Earth. The entire planet was a compressed space fragment? Or even, space fragments could solidify? These things had once again subverted eBay's logic. eBay, then, a planet built from spatial fragments? Then, what exactly is this place? End quote. The energy storage warehouse of the tri-body civilization. In other words, after such a long space journey, you have successfully infiltrated the back garden of the 3-body civilization and found their resource warehouse. The system's voice was filled with excitement. Resources. It was energy. The reason eBay's body could continue to evolve was because of the endless energy he had. Now that he had discovered the energy source of a planet, how could he not be excited? Just as eBay was so shocked that he didn't know what to say, in Area 51, Morpheus was directing the group of scientists to create a space fragment in an attempt to collect the crystal planet. But after the space debris was created, Morpheus and the others realized that their technology had completely lost its use. Mayor, this planet is very strange. Our space vortexes can't form around us at all. End quote. The space fragment has been divided, but it cannot be used. End quote. It has lost its effect. This planet isn't affected by the spatial fragment suction at all. Damn it. Could it be that our technology can only be used in the Milky Way or the solar system? The scientists couldn't figure it out. Their eyes were wide open and they kept talking. Just as they were still thinking, Yibei's voice rang out in their minds. Morpheus and everyone else, this planet is not made of crystals or so-called diamonds. The entire planet is made of supercompressed space fragments. Countless space fragments were solidified and then gathered to form a planet. Each of these spatial fragments contains a massive amount of resources. Yibei's voice was calm. But after hearing this voice, Morpheus, Caesar, and the others' eyes almost popped out. How is this possible? It's true that spatial fragments can be compressed, but there's a certain limit to it. No matter how you compress it, it's still in the form of a fragment. How can it turn into a crystal? One of the scientists growled, feeling as if his logic was being violently conflicted. Yup, this is unbelievable. End quote. We've never heard of such technology before. It's too extraordinary. End quote. End quote. Unbelievable. Could the king be wrong? Shut up. My king, there's no mistake. A large number of scientists started discussing. At this moment, the extremely shocked Morpheus slowly regained his senses. His eyes flashed with a bright light. As an intelligent life form, he had done countless calculations in his mind just now. We can also compress the space. But after a certain point, the degree of compression will continue to decrease. However, this doesn't mean that there's no way. There must be some laws that we overlooked. If we can really compress space into a crystal shape, that would be amazing. Morpheus's voice trembled as he spoke. Crystal. It meant that it was easy to carry around. It could even be made into all kinds of accessories. The most important thing was that the crystal's shape had an extremely terrifying stability. It wasn't like ordinary space fragments, which couldn't be carried normally. Any living creature would pay a heavy price once they touched it. If he could really master that kind of technology. In the future, the Snake Tribe civilization would be able to continuously cut space and make all kinds of magical things. A storage ring, the storage bracelet, the storage necklace. Some powerful leaders could even cut out a huge piece of space and suck a planet into it. Then, they could make a crystal ring out of the space and wear it on their hands. Just thinking about it was enough to excite them. Morpheus thought of many things. At this time, Yibei, who was entrenched on the so-called compressed planet of spatial fragments, was seriously thinking about something else. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. System. Since this is a compressed space, I can also enter those spaces. The endless energy, can I plunder all of it? And NBSB, whoosh. Yibei was very excited as he said this. The resources of the tri-body civilization. He didn't even need to think to know that it was a real treasure. Of course you can. The system replied quickly. Then how can I get in? Yibei was very confused. When his body was entrenched on this planet, he even used his sharp teeth to bite a few times. In the end, he realized that his indestructible teeth could not leave any trace on this planet. Host, do you see the lines on the surface of this planet? These runic patterns were actually a type of password, similar to the password used in human lockboxes. As long as we can crack these, we can enter. The system answered. But when Yibei heard this, he was immediately stunned. What a joke. Even though he'd acquired the universe lingais. However, he didn't know anything about the written language. Is there any other way besides this? Yibei continued to ask. This was a huge treasure trove in front of him. Yibei would definitely not be satisfied if he just watched helplessly and couldn't get his hands on it. Of course, the system paused. End quote. With the host's current mental strength, you can completely invade it and let your body in. But if you do that, the three-body civilization will definitely find out. End quote. End quote. According to my judgment, this is already the core of the three-body civilization, and there are many three-body life forms guarding it. If you enter, you'll definitely attract their attention. In 10 minutes at most, those three-body life forms will come over, and the consequences will be unimaginable." End quote. All right, I got it. Yibei didn't care about the bullsh asterisk T consequences. After hearing this, his eyes suddenly lit up. 10 minutes was more than enough. After he entered the crystal space, he would release all the mutated beasts and devour them crazily. 10 minutes later, he would go out and deal with the three-body life forms. He would devour them as well. He was going to war anyway. And NBSB, whoosh. His voice fell. In the next second, Yibei's mental power domain was released in a frenzy. Below the domain realm, he could clearly feel that if he wanted to, he could enter these spatial fragments in an instant. However, just as Yibei released his mental power domain, in the Centaur constellation, almost all the three-body creatures had noticed the situation. Even the three-body creatures that were returning from the edge of the Milky Way felt the abnormality. After all, the resource storage capsule was the core of the three-body civilization. Damn it, there's something in our storage. Who is it? That's impossible. Our defense has always been very strong. Any life form above level 3 will be detected immediately as soon as they enter the Centaur constellation, unless it's a life form without any level. And how can that kind of life form release such a powerful spiritual force? Quick, return immediately. End quote. Activate the highest level of defense. In addition, immediately mobilize the army to go over and take a look at the situation. End quote. In space, the three-body creatures that were rushing toward the centaurs roared one after another with murderous intent. On the other hand, in the centaurs, the three-body creatures that remained here had already taken action. Hurry up. No matter what it is, it will have to pay the price today. End quote. Surround our storage room. No living being is allowed to escape. End quote. Hurry. And NBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. One by one, huge planets began to move at superlight speed, heading straight for the crystal planet. And as for Yibei, after releasing his spirit domain, he discovered to his surprise that he could form a certain connection with these crystal spaces. He could enter them with a slight thought. I thought this kind of defense would be very strong, but it's just SOSO. The technology of the three-body civilization is just like that. Yibei flicked his tongue. The moment he finished speaking, his body disappeared into thin air and entered one of the crystal spaces. This was an extremely strange universe. Yibei entered, and when he saw the situation inside, his eyes widened. The entire crystal contained boundless energy. The energy had turned into liquid, forming a boundless silver-white ocean. Moreover, the liquid was constantly releasing a terrifying aura. Whoosh. Yibei didn't hesitate. His body immediately turned into a stream of light and rushed in the direction of the liquid. Plop. Following that, his entire body directly jumped into it. Gulp. He opened his mouth, and an endless stream of energy immediately flowed into his throat through his mouth, transforming into extremely pure energy. It made Yibei feel as if his entire body was bathed in sunlight, and he felt extremely comfortable. This energy is so pure. It doesn't need any transformation at all. After being devoured, it has all become a part of my body. System, do you know what this is? Yibei frantically devoured the energy, and his body transformed into its largest form. Its 10,000-meter-tall giant body churned in the energy liquid. This is the purest liquid energy. Not only can it be used as a high-quality energy source, but it can also allow any creature to achieve the effect of rapid recovery. To put it simply, if a creature is seriously injured and only its head is still alive, it can quickly grow a new body if it is soaked in this liquid. The system was very calm. What? But when Yibei heard this, he was greatly shocked. Only his head was left. It could grow a new body after soaking in it? Wasn't this the spiritual liquid that could revive the dead? It was a super treasure from cultivation and Xianxia novels. Morpheus, Caesar, and everyone else, prepare some sealed containers. Yibei was extremely excited. At the same time, he released his spiritual power domain and spoke to all the creatures in the snake civilization. Walala. In the next instant, countless vortexes appeared in the endless sea of energy. Then, countless mutated beasts came out of the hole. Gulu. Plop, plop, plop. Ha ha ha, what is this? The taste is really good. End quote. What a powerful energy liquid. This is definitely the most delicious drink I've ever had. It's amazing. End quote. End quote. Don't drink all of it. Pack some of it. These things can be used as holy healing medicine at critical moments. End quote. Yes, yes, put on more of an act. The number of mutant beasts was simply too high. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. With eBay's orders, they all brought their utensils. The ocean of energy, which had been boundless, began to dry up in less than 10 seconds under the attack of these mutated beasts. To eBay's surprise, many mutated beasts even brought stable space fragments to store the energy liquid. There were even some corporate powers, who had all kinds of large-scale storage devices. Looking at the situation, it would not be long before this energy liquid would appear on the dining tables of the major races of the snake civilization and be sold as drinks. This was not only energy, but also endless wealth. The benefits of the pure energy liquid were simply too many. After 20 seconds, all the liquid energy in the crystal space was swept away. And as for eBay, in a short 20 seconds, he had devoured at least several hundred tons of liquid energy. At this moment, his entire body was exuding a terrifying aura. The liquid energy seemed to form layers of mist that appeared on the surface of his body. Except for eBay, the hundreds of billions of mutated beasts in the surrounding area were also releasing a terrifying aura. End quote. I feel that my body has become stronger again. It has increased by at least 3 times. End quote. Me too. End quote. After swallowing this liquid, it's like I've been injected with stimulants. My entire body is filled with power, and this power is permanently enhanced without any side effects. End quote. He still wants to continue devouring. Similarly, the mutated beasts were also extremely excited. End quote. There's still a long time before the 3-body life forms rush over. I'll continue devouring. End quote. Yibei's body had also undergone tremendous changes, but he didn't have the time to observe it in detail. The entire planet was filled with endless crystalline space. If he didn't frantically sweep through it now, when else would he be able to? Walalala. And so, in the following days, Yibei led the group of mutated beasts in a frenzied raid. The second crystal space. This place actually stored a strange energy metal. Each of those metals stored an incomparably huge amount of power. Just one piece was enough to supply the electricity of a white-story building for hundreds of years. Therefore, all the mutated beasts naturally didn't hold back and instantly plundered everything. The third crystal space. This place was actually filled with a type of magical fruit tree. On top of each tree, there were huge golden fruits. Each fruit was the size of a human's head. They had a thick skin on the surface and would break with a light cut. Inside was the golden flesh. And those fruits all contained powerful energy. As long as one ate one, not only would the taste be refreshing, but the body would also be full of power. In addition, the mutated beasts also discovered another situation. This fruit tree actually relied on water to grow. As long as there was water, it could grow no matter how bad the environment was. The result was not surprising. When the mutated beasts discovered this magical fruit tree, they immediately determined that it was the best source of food and was of great importance to the entire snake civilization. It was not enough to eat all the fruits or store them. The mutated beasts dug out the fruit trees along with their roots and transplanted them on the planet they lived on and near their houses. From the looks of it, they were preparing to use this fruit tree as their daily food. The fourth crystal space. The fifth one. The sixth one. The mutated beasts led by Yibei swept through the area and plundered everything, no matter what it was. 10 minutes later, the number of crystal spaces they had swept through had actually reached over 100. At this moment, the resources in the entire snake tribe civilization instantly became abundant. Every living creature had huge assets, and their economic level had increased by tens of thousands of times. But, at this moment, the 3 days of life finally arrived. And NBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. Tens of thousands of 3-body life forms surrounded the crystal planet. Each 3-body life form was incomparably huge, and their bodies emitted a faint, ghostly light. When they gathered together, the entire outer space was covered in a cold, killing intent. In fact, these beings were indeed very angry. What happened in the crystal dimension? In fact, it was transmitted to the consciousness of every three-body life form at the first moment. These bastards really deserve to die. How did they get here? Wasn't it said that the entire solar system and the Milky Way had been completely destroyed? The most terrifying thing is that they even managed to enter our resource repository. A three-body creature was furious. End quote. According to what we know, these B** stars appeared through a space vortex. But wormholes that can cross such a long distance in an instant would never appear. Also, we didn't detect any possibility of wormholes being built in the Centaur constellation. What is going on? There were also some three-body creatures that were filled with surprise and puzzlement. End quote. They possess technology that is beyond our knowledge? Idiot, what's the point of discussing this? We'll surround this place and drag all of them out. After that, we'll search their memories and we'll naturally know what's going on. Yes, we must make these guys pay a heavy price. These three-body creatures were aggressive. In addition to those who had surrounded them, the three-body creatures who were rushing back from the direction of the Milky Way were undoubtedly even more furious. End quote. Impossible, absolutely impossible. The Milky Way has been downgraded. There's no reason for them to still be alive, right? End quote. When we entered the edge of the galaxy, we were sure that those creatures were still there. But when the dimension reduction attack began, they did disappear and entered the space debris. But even so, there's no reason for them to suddenly enter the Centaur constellation from the galaxy and even find our storage. End quote. No matter what, I must kill them this time. And MBSB, whoosh whoosh whoosh. His voice was filled with anger. At the same time, these three-body life forms were advancing at an extremely fast speed in the universe. The joy of destroying the Milky Way completely disappeared at this moment, replaced by shame and anger. On the other side, within the crystal dimension, when Yi Bei led the mutated beasts and swept through the endless resources, he immediately felt the three-bodied creatures surrounding him. Hiss! He released his spiritual power domain. When he saw the tens of thousands of three-bodied creatures outside, even Yi Bei couldn't help but gasp in surprise. Think about it. When you were surrounded by tens of thousands of huge planets, what kind of feeling would you have? It must be extremely exciting. But Yi Bei was only momentarily surprised. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. He quickly regained his composure. So what if there are many of them? Previously, it could devour a three-body life form. Now, it could devour 2, 3. Not to mention that after such a long period of evolution, the creatures of the Snake Tribe civilization had all become countless times stronger. Now that these guys are here, they're just here to deliver food to us. If we devour them and absorb their memories and knowledge, our civilization will definitely improve rapidly. Yi Bei flicked his forked tongue. When he said this, his tone was filled with excitement and madness. Everyone, listen up. The three-body creatures are already here. Now, follow me and kill our way out. And devour them all. Yi Bei's voice was cold, and his killing intent was even stronger than the three-bodied creatures. Yes. 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 Yi Bei was simply too powerful. At the same time, no living creature would dare challenge his authority in the entire Snake Tribe civilization. The moment he finished speaking, the mutated beasts that were devouring the energy immediately stopped and replied in unison. Get them out immediately. And quote, of course, we've already locked onto which crystal dimension they're in. We'll be able to separate that dimension immediately. If they still don't come out by then, we'll crush that dimension. Those bastards definitely won't survive. End quote. End quote. If they don't show their strength, these beasts will never know what's terrifying. End quote. Right, let's start. Outside, the three-body life forms were making a lot of noise. All of them looked as if they wanted to immediately destroy Yi Bei. However, just as they finished storing their energy and were about to extract the crystalline dimension fragment, Yi Bei had already led the 100 billion mutated beasts out of the crystalline dimension. Walala, there were simply too many of them. They covered the sky and were densely packed. When Yi Bei suddenly rushed out, the three-body creatures did not even have time to react. Kill. End quote. Ha. So much food. I can eat as much as I want a day. End quote. End quote. I want to eat. I want to eat like crazy. End quote. That's great. I feel that after devouring today, I'll be at least 10,000 times stronger. Haha. The most important thing was that when these mutated beasts rushed out of the crystal space, they were directly advancing in space at an incredible speed. At the same time, each mutated beast let out a terrifying sound. Three-body life forms were indeed terrifying, and it was very powerful. However, in the eyes of these mutated beasts, they were no different from food. They didn't even need Yibei's help. The mutated beasts were already frantically charging towards the nearest three-body creature. At this moment, the three-body life forms finally came to their senses. Hurry, hurry. These bastards are coming out on their own. Fire immediately. We must kill them all. End quote. We've received information that these monsters can penetrate our defenses. Everyone, be prepared. We can't let them in. Otherwise, they'll devour us. End quote. Damn it, fire. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In just an instant, the space was filled with all kinds of dazzling flames. After being taught a few lessons previously, all the three-body life forms had learned to be smarter. They were no longer as arrogant and haughty as before. When they saw the mutated beasts in space, they did not hesitate to open fire. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Yibei's body was coiled up in space. When he saw the three-bodied creatures frantically attacking him, his eyes were extremely indifferent. Bang, bang. It had to be said that the technology of three-body life forms was very advanced. A beam of light hit one of the mutated ants. Yibei seemed to have heard a loud bang. Half of the mutated ant's body disappeared into space, turning into dust. However, the ant wasn't that easy to kill. With the last of its strength, it managed to retrieve some liquid energy from the container and swallowed it in one gulp. Immediately after, his body recovered at an unbelievable speed. But of course, the mutated creatures that were hit and recovered were considered lucky. Many life forms were directly hit and died without any chance of recovery. Everyone, simply attacking and devouring like this isn't a good idea. Once you penetrate their defenses and enter the surface of their bodies, all of you, listen up. Reproduce, speed up the reproduction. Perhaps our creature level is very weak now, but if we increase our numbers, no creature can stop us. And NBSB, whoosh. Yibei released his mental power domain. It resounded in the minds of every mutated beast. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Bang, bang, bang. In space, the three-body life forms attacks did not stop for a moment. But even though their attacks could cause fatal damage to the mutated beasts, they still couldn't resist the temptation of delicious food. Roar, roar, roar. Food. Fufufu. End quote. I think I can already smell delicious food. End quote. GG. End quote. Don't stop me. For food, for devouring. So what if I die? The three-bodied creatures could not understand the madness of the mutated beasts. Their attacks, they only managed to resist for less than 10 seconds before they were invaded. Boom. A giant mutated gorilla directly penetrated the defensive barrier. When its body rubbed against the defensive barrier, all of its hair was burned, and its body was covered in blood, looking extremely terrifying. Crack. However, the gorilla did not seem to feel any pain at all. After entering the surface of the three-body life, he opened his mouth without hesitation and bit down. There was a crack. He tore off a piece of meat. Gulp. Immediately after, it devoured. The meat turned into an extremely pure energy that instantly flowed through his body. Then, his body that had been injured quite badly actually recovered extremely quickly at this moment. In less than 2 seconds, he had completely recovered. His current body was even much stronger than before. Other than the mutated gorilla, it was the same for the other mutated beasts. Crack, crack, crack. They charged into the defense and started devouring them one by one. Some of the mutated beasts even ignored the attacks of the three-bodied civilization and charged into the defense with half of their bodies. It was too crazy and terrifying. Crack, crack, gulp. Without exception, the mutated beasts that had broken through the defense all began to devour the food as soon as they reached the ground. This situation was completely unexpected to the three-body creatures. Moreover, the most terrifying thing wasn't the crazy devouring. The mutated beasts, especially the oviparous creatures, immediately began to follow Yi Bei's will and quickly lay eggs on the surface of the tri-body life form and began to reproduce. To have evolved to this stage, the various races had also increased their rate of reproduction. After the egg was laid, read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. A ghastly and terrifying scene appeared. Those eggs didn't even need to hatch. They started to crack. And then, young ones crawled out one after another. After they appeared, they first devoured the eggshell. After that, they began to devour the bodies of the three-body life forms without restraint. As their energy was replenished, these fellows evolved at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 10 seconds, their bodies had already reached the stage of maturity. When the three-body creatures noticed this, they were all terrified. How is this possible? End quote. What a fast reproduction rate. Damn it, these inferior creatures are actually reproducing in my body. It's too disgusting. End quote. What are they? They were all the lowest level creatures in the universe, and they were of different species, so why were they all gathered together? Furthermore, it had such terrifying power? Are they not afraid of death? Bastard, quickly think of a way. Even the Zergs don't reproduce as fast as them. These disgusting things treat us as food. At this rate of reproduction and devouring, our existence will only be a stepping stone for them to grow stronger. The previous round of attacks by the three-body creature had indeed caused the death of many mutated beasts. But the mutated beasts' reproduction rate was far beyond their expectations. If this continues, the number of monsters will only increase, and we'll suffer terrible destruction. I have to think of something. We can't allow them to continue devouring us. A three-body being roared. This voice immediately attracted the approval of many three-body creatures. I'm going to self-destruct. Bastard. Even if I die, I'll make these disgusting things pay the price. A three-bodied being shouted angrily. Not too long ago, the tragic death of the three-bodied being that had gone to the solar system. The scene of that time was still clearly reflected in his consciousness. Rather than being devoured, it was better to self-destruct and release the last of its brilliance. When he thought of this, the three-body life form roared angrily and immediately self-destructed. And NBSB, Hong Long Long. In just an instant, an incomparably powerful aura began to brew in his body. A three-body life form, each one of them was bigger than Earth. Their bodies were a super powerful energy reactor. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the explosion would be when such a super energy combination exploded. If the solar system still existed, such an explosion, it might even turn the entire solar system into ashes in an instant. Not good. At that moment, Yi Bei was also frantically devouring a three-body life form. When he sensed that a three-body life form had self-destructed, his heart trembled, and his entire body turned cold. Although his body was now extremely powerful, his intuition told him that even so, it still couldn't withstand the damage brought by the explosion. Crack, crack. Uft, uft. When Yi Bei sensed that something was amiss, in fact, many mutated beasts had also sensed it. The golden lion was originally devouring madly. However, he suddenly stopped. What happened? There's a sense of danger. Not only golden lion, Caesar, Blood Moon, and the Queen Ant also stopped at this moment. The three-body life form is about to self-destruct? Bastards, this is a waste of food. You're going to die anyway, so why don't you want to be devoured by us? If that's the case, it's just a change of method and energy to survive. These three-body life forms are really unreasonable. The apostles quickly expressed their opinions after sensing the abnormality. It had to be said that after such a long period of evolution, all the mutated beasts of the snake civilization had undergone a huge change in their thinking without them realizing it. In their opinion, the entire universe had to make way for their evolution. But, from the perspective of the snake civilization, this was understandable. Any creature that had evolved to a higher level would look down on the weaker creatures. It was just like how human civilization had looked down on ants and other races, and even thought that they were high-level creatures. This was also a common problem in the development of all civilizations. However, Yi Bei couldn't be bothered to care about this. All he wanted was the loyalty of all the mutated beasts in the entire snake civilization. End quote. Everyone, a three-body life form is preparing to self-destruct. I'll open the space fragment. If you sense danger, you can hide in it in advance. In addition, I don't want anything to happen to any living creature, including the newly born life form. End quote. Chi. As soon as Yi-Bei said this, his mental power domain immediately spread wildly through the universe. In the Forest of Death, a large number of vortexes appeared on the space fragments book. Immediately after, these vortexes appeared directly next to the bodies of every mutated beast. If they wanted to, they could hide in them at any time. At this moment, Yi-Bei was able to control hundreds of billions of spatial vortexes with his mental power domain at the same time. It was easy to imagine how terrifying his mental power had reached. Yes. Many of the mutated beasts had instinctively sensed danger when the three-body creature was about to self-destruct, but when they heard Yi-Bei's voice, they immediately calmed down. Crack. As it spoke, it continued to devour, completely ignoring the three-body life forms. He was already prepared to self-destruct. He was extremely angry. After seeing the attitude of the mutated beasts, almost all the three-body creatures were infuriated. Bastards, these guys are really not afraid of death. End quote. Monster. He's definitely a monster. End quote. Our weapons can't kill them at all. There are too many of them. Even if we keep firing, some of them will still escape. End quote. Originally, there was only one three-body life form that wanted to self-destruct, but now, the number directly increased to more than 100. Furthermore, after these three-body life forms had made up their minds, they did not hesitate at all. Buzz. Boom. The self-destruction began. The entire outer space was filled with violent energy. The explosion of a three-body life form was far more terrifying than the explosion of an ordinary planet. The surrounding three-body creatures that had not self-destructed were also frightened by the terrifying power at this moment. Whoosh. They all used their fastest speed to escape. But the speed of the explosion was too fast. And NBSB, Hong Long. After a few seconds, the first three-body life bomb finally exploded. At the same time, the mutated beasts that had sensed the danger and were approaching all entered the space vortex at their fastest speed. The moment their bodies entered the vortex disappeared on the spot as if it had never appeared. As for Yi-Bei, his body retreated from the surface of a three-body life form into space. The surroundings were filled with all sorts of violent energy. Even Yi-Bei himself felt an unprecedented sense of danger. However, he still had no intention of backing down. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World, site only. His body was suspended in space. At the same time, he was surrounded by the three-body life forms that were about to explode. Yi-Bei wanted to see if he could devour the energy generated by the explosion of these creatures. However, just as the first three-body life form exploded, the system's voice rang out in Yi-Bei's mind.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.